Auggie and Me, the Julian chapter. Julian. Oh my God, I cried. That's why you named Dad Julian? Even though everyone called him Jules, that was his name. We, she said, nodding. And I'm named after Dad, I said. So I'm named after this kid. That is so cool. She smiled and ran her fingers through my hair, but she didn't say anything. Then I remember her saying, the last time I saw Tortel, "So what happened to him?" I asked. "To Julian." Almost instantly, tears rolled down Grandmure's cheeks. "The Germans took him," she said, "that same day. He was on his way to school. They were making another sweep of the village that morning. By now, Germany was losing the war, and they knew it." "But," I said, "he wasn't even Jewish." "They took him because he was crippled," she said between sobs. "I'm sorry, I know you told me that word is a bad word, but I don't know any other word in English. He was an invalid. That word is the word in French, and that is why they took him. He was not perfect." She practically spat the word out. "They took all the imperfects from the village that day. It was a purge. The gypsies, the shoemaker's son, who was simple, and Julian, my Torteau. They put him in a cart with the others, and then he was put on a train to Drancy, and from there to Auschwitz, like my mother. We heard later from someone who saw him there, that they sent him to the gas chambers right away. Just like that, poof, he was gone. My savior, my little Julian." She stopped to wipe her eyes with a handkerchief, and then drank the rest of her wine. "His parents were devastated, of course. Mr. and Mrs. Beamer," she continued. "We didn't find out he was dead until after the liberation, but we knew. She dabbed her eyes. "I lived with them for another year after the war. They treated me like a daughter. They were the ones who helped me track down Papa, although it took some time to find him. So much chaos in those days. When Papa was finally able to return to Paris, I went to live with him. But I always visited the Beamers, even though they were very old. I never forgot the kindness that they showed me." She sighed. She finished her story. "Grandmere," I said after a few minutes, "that's like the saddest thing I've ever heard. I didn't even know you were in the war. I mean, Dad's never really talked about any of this." She shrugged. "I think it's very possible that I never told your father this story," she said. "I don't like to talk about sad things, you know. In some ways, I'm still the frivolous little girl I used to be. But when I heard you talking about that little boy in your school, I could not help but think of Torteau, and how afraid I had once been of him, and how badly we had treated him because of his deformity. Those children had been so mean to him, Julian. It breaks my heart to think of it." When she said that, I don't know, but something just really broke inside of me, completely unexpected. I looked down, and all of a sudden, I started to cry. And when I say I started to cry, I don't mean a few tears rolling down my cheeks. I mean like full-scale, snot-filled crying. "Julian," she said softly. I shook my head and covered my face with my hands. "I was terrible, Grandmere," I whispered. "I was so mean to Auggie. I'm so sorry, Grandmere." "Julian," she said again, "look at me." "No, look at me, monsieur." She took my face in her hands and forced me to look at her. I felt so embarrassed. I really couldn't look in her eyes. Suddenly, that word that Mr. Tushman had used, that word that everyone kept trying to force on me, came to me like a shout. "Remorse!" Yeah, there it was, that word in all its glory. Remorse. I was shaking with remorse. I was crying with remorse. "Julian," said Grandmere, "we all make mistakes, mon cher." "No, you don't understand," I answered. "It wasn't just one mistake. I was those kids who were mean to Torteau. I was the bully." "Grandmere, it was me." She nodded. "I called him a freak. I laughed behind his back. I left mean notes," I screamed. "Mom kept making excuses for why I did that stuff. But there wasn't any excuse. I just did it. I don't even know why. I don't even know." I was crying so hard I couldn't even speak. Grandmere stroked my head and hugged me. "Julian," she said softly, "you are so young. The things you did, you know they were not right. But that does not mean you are not capable of doing right. It only means that you chose to do wrong. This is what I mean when I say you made a mistake. It was the same with me. I made a mistake with Torto. But the good things about life, Julian, she continued, is that we can fix our mistakes sometimes. We learn from them. We get better. I never made a mistake like the one I made with Torto again. Not with anyone in my life. I have had a very, very long life. You will learn from your mistake too. You must promise yourself that you will never behave like that with anyone else again. One mistake does not define you, Julian. Do you understand me? You must simply act better next time. I nodded, but I still cried for a long, long time after that. My dream. That night I dreamt about Auggie. I don't remember the details of the dream, but I think we were being chased by Nazis. Auggie was captured, but I had a key to let him out, and in my dream I think I saved him. Or maybe that's what I told myself when I woke up. Sometimes it's hard to know with dreams. I mean, in this dream, the Nazis all look like Darth Vader's Imperial officers anyway, so it's hard to put too much meaning into dreams. But what was really interesting to me when I thought about it is that it had been a dream, not a nightmare. In the dream, Auggie and I were on the same side. I woke up super early because of the dream and didn't go back to sleep. I kept thinking about Auggie and Torto, Julian, the heroic boy I was named for. It's weird. This whole time I had been thinking about Auggie like he was my enemy. But when Grandmere told me that story, I don't know, it was just kind of sank in with me. I kept thinking of how ashamed the original Julian would be to know that someone who carried his name had been so mean. I kept thinking about how sad Grandmere was when she told the story. How could she remember all the details, even though it happened like 70 years ago? 70 years! Would Auggie remember me in 70 years? Would he still remember the mean things I called him? I don't want to be remembered for stuff like that. I would want to be remembered the way Grandmere remembers Torto. Mr. Tushman, I get it now. Remorse. I got up as soon as it was light out and wrote this note. Dear Auggie, I want to apologize for the stuff I did last year. I've been thinking about it a lot. You didn't deserve it. I wish I could have a do-over. I would be nicer. I hope you don't remember how mean I was when you're 80 years old. Have a nice life, Julian. P.S. If you're the one who told Mr. Tushman about the notes, don't worry. I don't blame you. When Grandmere woke up that afternoon, I read her the note. I'm proud of you, Julian, she said, squeezing my shoulder. Do you think he'll forgive me? She thought about it. That's up to him, she answered. In the end, mon cher, all that matters is that you forgave yourself. You are learning from your mistake, like I learned with Torto. Do you think Torto would forgive me? I asked. If he knew his namesake had been so mean? She kissed my hand. Torto would forgive you, she answered, and I could tell she meant it. Going home. I realized I didn't have Auggie's address, so I wrote another email to Mr. Brown asking him if he could send my note to Auggie and have him mail it to him for me. Mr. Brown emailed me back immediately. He was happy to do it. He said he was also proud of me. I felt good about that. I mean, like, really good. And it felt good to feel good. Kind of hard to explain, but I guess I was tired of feeling like I was this awful kid. I'm not. Like I keep saying over and over again, I'm just an ordinary kid. A typical, normal, ordinary kid who made a mistake. But now, I was trying to make it right. My parents arrived a week later. Mom couldn't stop hugging and kissing me. This was the longest I'd ever been away from home. I was excited to tell them about the email from Mr. Brown and the note I had written to Auggie, but they told me their news first. We're suing the school, Mom said excitedly. What? I cried. Dad is suing them for breach of contract, she said. She was practically chirping. I looked at Grandmere, who didn't say anything. We were all having dinner. They had no right to withdraw the enrollment contract, Dad explained calmly, like a lawyer. Not before we had been placed with another school. Hal told me in his office that they would wait to rescind their enrollment offer until after we had gotten accepted into another school, and they would return the money. We had a verbal agreement. But I was going to another school anyway, I said. Doesn't matter, he said. Even if they return the money, it's the principle of the thing. What principle? Grandmere said. She got up from the table. This is nonsense, Jules. Stupid. Stupid. Complete and utter nonsense. Mama, said Dad. He looked really surprised. So did Mom. You should drop this stupidity, said Grandmere. You don't really know all the details, Mama, said Dad. I know all the details, she yelled, shaking her fist in the air. She looked fierce. The boy was wrong, Jules. Your boy was in the wrong. He knows it. You know it. He did bad things to that other boy, and he is sorry for them. You should let it be. Mom and Dad looked at each other. With all due respect, Sarah, Mom said, I think we know what's best for... You don't know anything, yelled Grandmere. You don't know. You are too busy with lawsuits and stupid things like that. Mama, Dad shouted. She's right, Dad, I said. It was all my fault. All that stuff with Auggie, it was my fault. I was mean to him for no reason. It was my fault Jack punched me. I called Auggie a freak. What? Said Mom. I wrote those awful notes, I said quickly. I did mean stuff. It was my fault. I was the bully, Mom. It wasn't anyone else's fault but mine. Mom and Dad still didn't seem to know what to answer. Instead of sitting there like two idiots, said Grandmere, who was always saying things like they were, you should be praising Julian for this admission. He is taking responsibility. He is owning up to his mistakes. It takes much courage to do this kind of thing. Yes, of course, said Dad, rubbing his chin and looking at me. But I just don't think you understand all the legal ramifications. The school took our tuition and refused to return it, which blah, 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 said Grandmere, waving him away. I wrote him an apology, I said, to Auggie. I wrote him an apology, and I sent it to him in the mail. I apologized for the way I acted. You what? Dad said. He was getting mad now. And I told Mr. Brown the truth, too, I added. I wrote Mr. Brown a long email telling him the whole story. Julian, Dad said, frowning angrily, why did you do that? I told you I did not want you to write anything that acknowledged... Jules, said Grandmere loudly, waving her hand in front of Dad's face. I couldn't help but to laugh at this. Dad cringed. What did she say? Mom asked, who doesn't know French. Grandmere just told Daddy he's a brain like a cheese sandwich, I said. Mama, Dad said sternly, like someone was about to begin a long lecture. Mom reached out and put her hand on Dad's arm. Jules, she said quietly, I think your mom is right.